Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome back to Of Boot Behavior. This is episode 3, and now we are going into boot design proper. So, in episode 1, we measured the feet, we designed on the last. In episode 2, we designed the derby shoe. Now, let's design the derby boot. First thing first, we calculate the heel pitch of this shoe. And that's basically what I did by placing the tip of the last on a pencil and then calculating the elevation, how far it lifts off of the ground. So that distance was about 4 cm. So we're going to draw a right angle and mark out that 4 cm on the vertical line of that right angle. So this is the vertical line, I mark in 4 cm. Then we'll place the heel of our derby design on top on the 4 cm mark, the heel pitch mark. We will then place the ball point, that's the end of the vamp line, on the horizontal line and then trace out the rest of the derby design. So note it, the heel goes on the heel pitch mark, then the ball point lies on you angle the ball point till it lies on the horizontal line that you drew, the horizontal line of the 90 degrees line. So I have just traced out all of the designs that we had on our derby on this new mean form that we have elevated by the heel pitch. So I'll draw in all of those design lines and then we will go straight up into designing the boot proper. So the calculations that we are going to be needing in order to design our boot are calculations that are relevant to the ankle side, since all of the calculations that we needed for the shoe side of the boot have already been done in our design of the derby shoe. So I'll draw in all the curves and lines of the derby shoe, and then we will go into designing the boot part of the shoe. So by the boot parts, I mean all the parts around the ankle and calf. So to do that, we'll start off first of all by marking out the instep. Then we draw a line from the heel to the ball point. So that's the line. Then we draw in another line parallel to the line that we just drew, such that it runs from the instep. So I do that by just placing a right angle at the first line I drew and then using that as reference to draw my parallel line. So this second parallel line is from the instep. Again, I draw it instep parallel to the line that runs from the heel to the ball point. Now we'll measure from the heel to the instep. Find the measurement of that. On this last, I think it's about 19.4. Then we divide that measurement by 2 and mark that measurement that we got from the instep on that second parallel line that we did. So we mark in from there 9.7 cm. This point is the point from where, if we draw a perpendicular line from our baseline through that point, that is the center of gravity of this boot, meaning that the ultimate boot height of this boot is going to be referenced from this particular point. So I want this to be a 15 cm boot. So from where it touches the feather edge of the boot along this line will give me the height of this boot. Then of course, if I draw a 90 degrees angle from the vertical line of our right angle through that point, I begin to have the top line of the boot. Now let's talk about the calf. Remember, we measured our calf to be 25.5. I just rounded it up to 26 so that it's not so tight around my calf. Now I'll draw a right angle from the baseline through the back height. The point where it touches the top line that we generated is the point from which we are going to now mark half of the calf. Remember, this is just 1/2 of the boot, so we'll just mark 1/2 of the calf. So we said our calf was 26. 26 divided by 2 is 13. So rather than measure 13, it's going to be difficult to measure 13 with my pair of dividers. So I divided half of 13. 6.5 here, 6.5 there. That gives me 13. Now I'll simply draw the front part of my quarter by drawing a right angle from the baseline through that point where the terminal point of our curve showed. So from a point about 1.5 cm above the instep, I can now simply just curve in the rest of the curve of this front part of the quarter. So from here on in, the boot is just almost complete. The boot design is almost complete. In fact, the only thing we did was to draw that first line from the heel to the ball point, found the parallel line, used it to find our center of gravity, and then use this center of gravity line to find the ultimate boot height. And then from there, we added in half the calf, and we were on our way to celebration. So you see that boot design is pretty much easy. Right now, I'm going to trace out the line on which I'm going to reference the rest of the eyelets of this boot, of the quarter of this boot. So I'll trace that in and use the same distances I used in the earlier eyelets that we got for the shoe, and just use that to measure in the rest of the eyelets for this boot. Now I'm going to spring the back part of this quarter in a rather unorthodox way, to straighten out that curve there, because I want the tongue part of this boot, I want to be able to draw it straight. I want to be able to trace the pattern straight without having to factor in any curves when I'm doing my pattern. So I'll just finish off drawing in these design curves, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. So ultimately, this is what I want the tongue of my boot to look like. So like I said earlier on, I want to straighten it out. So rather than doing plenty maths, I'll just use a string and measure the actual length of this, the actual length of that curve, cut it at the actual length, then straighten out the string and measure the distance that I got. So this is about 14.5. So that's the same distance that if I extend this line like so, draw it on a straight line, I can now mark in 14.5 cm on this line, and that will be the exact length of the tongue. How cool is that? So I'll just simply, finish off every other thing relating to the tongue, and then probably just talking at the moment, and hope that you will intuitively get what is going on in the rest of the pattern. I really, really believe that you can catch. So you see how I straighten that out like that. So rather than doing plenty calculation, I just use the string method to spring it over. So what's remaining? I think what's remaining is to cut out the rest of the standard pattern and cut in my tracing channels and use that to create the pattern pieces of this boot. So what's remaining? What's remaining is to cut in my tracing channels and then also spring the vamp part of the boot. So right now I'm cutting in the tracing channels. The tracing channels are just little notches you cut along your design lines so that you're able to use that when you are marking in on leather with your silver pen or with an awl or any other thing that you're using to mark your leather. So the trick around it is not to cut all the way through on the line, just cutting several notches along each line to be able to help you retrace it when you are cutting or when you are marking in on leather. Also bear in mind that the tracing channels which we are going to cut for the tongue is the one that lies on the line that we straightened out when we use the string method to straighten out that line. So bear that in mind. One more thing that we need to do, we need to straighten out the vamp of this boot along the vamp line. So of course I use my original mean form to trace in the vamp point and draw out the vamp line. Then I'll mark the middle of this vamp line, cut it all the way just shy of the middle from the top and the bottom, and then align it to a straight line, and by so doing straighten it out so that when I have to create my pattern pieces, I'll be working on completely flat two-dimensional. I'll be working with completely flat two-dimensional standard patterns. This process, of course, I have talked extensively on it in my other videos. It is what is called springing of the vamp, much like we did with the string when we did the curve around the tongue area. If you measure the result of this when you're done, you will see that the standard last length remains the same. So we've not altered the standard last length in any way, and therefore when you make your patterns, it will match the last that you started off with in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that everything else from this point going forward is intuitive. It's just a matter of using the tracing channels that we created earlier on to cut in our pattern pieces. So I would want for you to watch the video till the end, because you're going to learn quite a number of things. You would see the places where I added the lasting allowance. I typically use about 2 cm of lasting allowance when I create a pattern the first time. When I test it out on the shoe and see that it works out, I can reduce the lasting allowance to 1.5, 1.2. Just as I desire, but to give myself some wiggle room, I start out with 1.5. Then around the vamp area, I would also add stitching allowances, and then around this quarter area, I would also add folding allowances for the top line and or whatnot. So for this quarter, I'll add my lasting allowance, and then also add my stitching allowance or my folding allowance. And then around this front area and the top line area, I would add also my stitching allowances, my folding allowances. So these folding allowances are just protrusions on the pattern that I'm adding, so that I can skive off the back, fold it, and so that when I'm working on my leather, rather than have a raw edge, I can fold it and it comes out, quite nicely and well finished and well done. So we cut out this. I think the only other part that is remaining is the middle part that contains the tongue. We also go ahead and punch in all of the eyelets. And then after this, we'll go ahead and, cut out the middle part of the vamp. So in this middle part of the vamp, we pay attention that we will need stitching allowances in front, where the capto is going to be stitched onto the rest of the vamp, and then on the two flanks we would also add stitching allowances, where the quarter would also lie on the vamp. That basically is it, ladies and gentlemen. There's not much drama to it. Here on in, you'll be able to figure it out. We are not forgetting also to add our our lasting allowances. So all of that, we do and have this pattern finished. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been lovely having you join me on this, how do they call it, hell of a ride. I've had fun every step of the way. I hope you are having fun too. If you have any questions, put them in the comment the comment section. I keep saying comment section. So put them in the comment section. And if you are in the paid class, also put your questions in the Telegram group, and we will dive in depth into anything that you need explanations for. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, have a lovely time. God bless you. And if you've not already done that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Peace.